some questions from a viewer, and just a whole series of them, and I thought maybe they would help direct one of these sort of babbling attempts. It starts out with, so what's your story? Yeah, that's a hell of a long one. Maybe I'll get to that a little later in this, but 420 videos, a previously kept man, not comfortable with people, don't want to invest the time to create a new game group. Okay. I think I have Asperger's. No big deal there. When I was young, I was taken to a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever. Several of them actually, but one of them wanted to test me for autism, and I didn't quite make it because, you know, I knew how to read very young, and I had no problem with language and things like that. Well, a lot of the factors were there, and I don't know if Asperger's had actually been defined at that point, but it certainly wasn't well known if it was. It wasn't like now. And I went, while I was in Eugene, Oregon, I noticed some articles in a couple of newspapers, local, kind of free rag that was very cool, as well as the regular daily newspaper, about the, call it a disorder, but you know, I think it's an evolutionary track. But anyway, it's a divergence from how most people are, right? And I noticed a lot of similarities, like the unwillingness to make eye contact, not feeling comfortable around people, particularly private worlds, this, that, and the other. And I started looking more and more into it and said, wow, that really sounds like me. And then I spent some time on a site called Wrong Planet. A lot of time there, spamming, whatever. And, you know, I started coming up with theories that everybody I've known and liked was close to the spectrum or even on it. And, you know, I mean, everybody that I've known and liked is weird. There's no question of that. I'm not sure how much the other aspect applies, really, but there's definitely a certain level of contemplative thought that doesn't seem present in most people, of introspection. And no one who I just don't relate to people who don't do that. And I relate to people who suppress it, but feel the need to, maybe, but find it's too painful or something. Anyway, that's to kind of give you a feeling of some of the me and people with me and why I'm not entirely comfortable with the idea of, say, going to a convention. And I'm comfortable with people that I know really, really intimately. But how do you meet people and become really, really intimate with them? And in certain circumstances, I've had magical moments. Like when I went away to college, I had this magical moment. Actually, it was going to orientation. I saw two guys getting on the same plane as me, and they were acting crazy as hell. And there was just this instant attraction on my side to them. And not sexual, just this attraction to the person or people. And it was funny because not the first day I was there, but the second day I was there, I met them again. And we got along great and became really good friends and are still in contact of this sort. But it's funny because I had stood out to them too, even though I was completely quiet. It's almost like there's this magical clicking of, wow, there's one of my kind. That's not really a human, you know? I don't know what it is. I went a long time thinking, I don't know what the hell we are. We're like, you know, it's just something, and I don't know what it is. I noticed a link with autistic kids I used to work with. And that drove me to say, we're all on the spectrum, everybody I get along with. Well, that's not the truth, I don't think. But I think that there is a good correlation between people I get along well with and people who, well, I think a large percentage of the people I get along with well were close to, at least had a lot of aspects that fit with that well. Am I high tech, or am I in high tech? I work as a software security tester, analyst, something for the past couple of years. Before that, I was a quality engineer, focusing mainly on reviewing code, although I did do some back-end testing as well. Right now I'm looking into going into development because I'm not sure what my future is where I am right now. You know, I went into that in another rant vaguely, and it's just, things are really in chaos right now, and I'm not sure that I trust that the team that I'm associated with is going to last. I sometimes sound like a philosophy major. Well, one of my degrees is in philosophy. But I think an intelligent person who's very introspective is going to come across in a lot of ways that way, because you spend so much time inside yourself thinking about yourself, your relationship with other things, and other things' relationship with one another. So, what is a recovering hobo? I mean, other than me? Well, this was something that came up because of some photographs of me where I looked like a hobo. Kind of look like one now. And then I revealed that, you know, I was jobless, and I didn't reveal I was in grad school at the time, but, you know, just that I scrounge food from places and stuff like that, and they still have all these traits. But the recovering part was I was kind of on the road to working what other people would consider a productive life. And, you know, I mean, it's a necessity right now. It wasn't at other times in my life. I seem awfully comfortable pontificating to the camera. I'm great pontificating to anyone. It's very hard for me to relate to people one-on-one, small groups, unless I'm very, very comfortable with them and can just cut loose and be silly and not care if they think that I'm a little child, which I am at heart. But I've always been able to kind of speak to the crowd or the camera or whatever without feeling, I mean, I don't know, there's no risk there, right? You know, I don't have to listen to them anymore. What am I hoping to gain from gaming, which appears to be a metaphor for my life? I don't know if it is a metaphor. I think it just is my life. So, I mean, when I was young, and even not so young, I had these, you know, dreams of greatness at various points. And I don't know, gaming allows me to touch onto the greatness of some historical figures or some fantasy figures or whatever, which is kind of a nice little escape. Part of me fears that if I ever really believed in anything, I could be dangerous. And I believe in some things like, you know, writing good code and coding standards. Fairness, that's the dangerous one. Believing in fairness, believing in justice. Those are the things that I am at risk for. And if I ever really understood what good was, I would probably end up as, you know, a Hitler or a mass murderer or something. Or just dead, you know, I mean, one or the other. But it's not that I'm really hoping to gain anything. It's just that my whole life I've always had games involved in it. And often military, political, economic, more and more detailed as I went because I wanted to imagine better, or I wanted to trigger my imagination better. So anyway, what's my story? I don't know, man. An aging failure who's trying to make sure he has retirement money. I left. I was crap from about 7th grade in terms of doing the things that one should do. Everybody has their little problems. About 7th grade, they started getting pretty serious. Avoidant behavior. I would stop going to school because I didn't have my homework, so I would miss more and more. And I just really didn't want to have to be troubled with other people in that way, I think. Didn't want to be forced to be around them, to interact. I think that's a part of it, because I really, really get fatigued around other people. And even people I'm very close with, it's very draining for me. And even when I'm enjoying the hell out of myself, like I did, trying to act, or whatever, it's just so tiring. Work is that way too. I just want to be at home and I want to hide from everything. And then when I went to college, I went with the best of intentions, as many years in high school I did not that many, I was only there for 4. I was many years in college though. I think I was 5 years straight, and then long back. Anyway, when I first went, I said, okay, I got accepted to a good school, but if I prove myself here, maybe I can get into a better school, with the intentions of going to Cornell. And which was kind of my first choice, even though I applied to better schools initially. Once I was in this situation and had so much interaction with people, friends, very, very close friends in college, that was so tiring in its own way that going to classes, which was always kind of a questionable thing in high school, became even less valuable in college. And one thing that I learned was you can kind of get by if you either go to classes or do your work. Now, I did neither, of course, but and still kind of scraped through for a long time. Then I had some great gaming experiences, especially when I had my first girlfriend, and when she dumped me after we were trying a long-distance relationship. I just kind of withdrew completely from school in my head during the week before finals and then finals week, and boy did that hose me. This was in my, I think, 5th year, I'm not sure. We played a week of PAX Britannica, where we played several games of it, and then we played a week of just Terrible Swift Sword, with people coming in and out constantly. I ended up one class short of graduating at that point. It had to be a history of philosophy course. And I had a course that I had, I think, turned everything in, but it ended up a grade got lost or something. There was a grading error on my report, on my transcript, and I, rather than having to try to figure out whether to take a test or to write a paper or anything like that, just ended up letting that slip. And that ended up being one of the courses that I could have used, and just kind of ended up being a failure after a year and a half or whatever. And then I had taken 2 classes on that last semester and passed one of them, but ended up failing the other. And when I went to registration or whatever to try to figure out what was going to happen, they asked me a question of, okay, well, are you going to take the class here? And my figuring was, I'm planning on going back to my parents and help them build their barn. So, I just said, I don't think so. Well, I ended up becoming dematriculated for that. So that even though I went back the next semester in the fall, I couldn't take my class because I was no longer really a student. And that was just weird. And then I kind of bummed around for a while. I think I had a couple jobs in there. I don't know what happened. And because back with my parents, I realized, my God, you know, I had friends when I was in college. What few friends that I had from high school were all gone by the time I got back to the vague area where my parents were. And they were moving to this barn, which was away from any civilization, and I didn't have a driver's license or anything, and I just hated it. There was just nothing for me to do, no one. I was playing games solo, but that's it. And I was writing letters to a friend in Buffalo about one of the games I was playing solo. I was that lonely and that disconnected. So I ended up going back to Buffalo with like nothing, trying to get my class back and getting back in work. And I bumped around for a couple of years, had some really violent, a really violent relationship that was weird as hell. And then ended up meeting the woman I would marry. And after we were together for a couple of years, I went back to school for acting because I had done a couple of community plays and really liked it. And I kind of went semi-pro for a little bit, and then long period forward, lots of gaming, friends still there, but slowly dropping off as they moved to other places. And we just couldn't seem to get more war gamers in. We could get people who were into the Euros or into the lighter games, but as the balance shifted, the group became no longer willing to play anything of any size anymore. And that had really was largely dropped off. And then just before my wife was going to graduate from university, I went back and finished up my last class and graduated before her just so she wouldn't beat me. And we lived together for a while still, and as far as I know, everything was fine. And then we moved from a really nice large apartment to a much smaller place, and boy did things become difficult in a smaller environment. The comfort was gone I no longer had a place to hide in the same way, and I was going nuts, and that was driving her nuts, and it was just horrible. And she gave me the boot, and by that point I had no one left really. Everybody had left. There were a couple people still around, but there was no gaming going on regularly except for really light stuff. Anyway, I moved back to my parents, went back to school, picked up a computer science degree at that point, which was what I originally went to school for, even though I ended up with a philosophy degree. And I mean, I worked my ass off. I did it in 2 years, which is amazing. It meant all I was doing was computer science classes. I had all the gen ed type stuff done, but I mean, just total focus. And whatever classes I had before, very few of them counted because things had changed a lot in 20 years or whatever. I graduated, with near a 4.0. Was convinced into applying to grad schools. Did so. Thought, okay, I'm just going to keep rocking. Now, I was pretty fatigued by the time those 2 years were up. When I got to grad school, I no longer had anyone to impress. I no longer had to impress my dad. You know, I was away again. I was on my own, and I was miserable, but I didn't find any reason to force myself to work. So, I kind of putzed around in grad school. I didn't learn a hell of a lot. I don't know if I could have, but the bigger thing was I didn't manage to impress anyone enough. Well, one person in network research, but I turned down his offer to sponsor me. And because that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do AI, or I wanted to do complexity theory or something like that. I did not want to do network research. I gave it a try, and I really disliked it. So, I mean, I graduated kind of not doing well. And I had and there was kind of an option to go into teaching or whatever there, but I ended up throwing my resume out, and I got 2 job offers, within a couple days of putting my resume online. So I came down here, and the first couple of years here I didn't have my games. I was kind of frantic in terms of frantic. It's like frantic and frenetic combined. In terms of, I wanted to find dance again because I was dancing up in Eugene so heavily every week, and at least a couple times, usually a couple times. And I found a place here, and then that eventually died out after I had a bad illness, and I couldn't sustain the whole place that way. I mean, I was really the reason people were coming in the end. And then, I don't know, I moved into a nicer place. I got my games up here, I got room to play, and now I'm sort of settling into that life. So there's my story. Alright, I think that's more than enough.